In 1970, Congress passed the Occupational Safety and Health Act. This act created a government agency to protect the American workforce. And I learned about the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, also known as OSHA, when I worked for Fish Construction Company at a refinery in Phillips, Texas. And after orientation and safety training, I was handed equipment mandated by OSHA for work in the industrial park: a hard hat, a pair of clear plastic shatter-resistant glasses with side protection. I was offered a back brace. I was required to wear long-sleeve shirts in the summer in 105, 108, and 110 degrees. I was required to wear canvas jeans while at work. I was required to provide my own leather gloves, and I had to purchase and wear steel-toed work boots. All of this stuff was required by law and employment to wear and was known as PPE, personal protective equipment. I could not enter the plant without PPE. Centuries earlier, a writer believed to be the Apostle Paul sat in a house under arrest and wrote a letter to Christians in Ephesus. We read the latter portion of that letter. The writer urged the Ephesians, "Be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his power." The writer could have stopped right there. He could have left some firm impression that all one needed for protection was a rather hearty belief system in the Lord, an almost mystic love of the Almighty that God will provide. Nothing more need be done by the individual. You can wave at the boat floating by you while standing in the floodwaters. You can jump off the roof. You can play football without padding, be the paintball warrior without goggles, head and chest protection, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his power. That would have been a horrible way to end his remarks. But he continued. He said, "Put on the whole armor of God." The writer said the powers around the Ephesians were immense, and he listed them: rulers and authorities, cosmic powers of the present darkness, spiritual forces of evil. He commanded the Ephesians to be vigilant, put on the whole armor of God, and then with the image of a Roman soldier, the writer listed personal protective equipment offered to us by God. The writer borrows his analogy of spiritual PPE from the armor of a Roman soldier. He speaks metaphorically of helmets, swords, breastplates, belts, and shields. And it would be fitting for the writer during those days to be relevant and contemporary for his hearers. But I wonder, what would he have written in this day and age with an eye toward an ICU nurse who wears a hazmat suit, fully covered from head to toe, almost unrecognizable, fighting off a deadly viral pestilence which has killed over 620,000 Americans. And today, COVID has mutated into Delta. Today, Delta overruns hospitals' ICUs, causes makeshift hospitals to be set up from tents and parking garages. I wonder if the Ephesians writer would have taken his example from personal protective equipment needed today. Editors Timothy Merrill and Carl Wilton, they write for a popular journal that is read by many preachers. They challenge preachers this week to move from the illustration of military armor to consider areas needing bodily protection in a pandemic, what areas are most vulnerable, most in need of protection from the COVID Delta virus, and how might these be metaphorically preached? The University of California, Merced lists points of bodily entry for this deadly little virus, places of vulnerability. These entry points require a special armor, a special protection. They noted these as 5 areas. The first was eye and face protection. The second was hand protection. The third was body protection. The fourth, respiratory protection. And the fifth was hearing protection. So with apologies to the writer of Ephesians, and no less faithful, I think, to the point of being armored spiritually, here are some thoughts. We need eye and face protection. Lust is one of the 7 deadly sins. Researchers estimate 200,000 to 12 million Americans are addicted to pornography. 40 million Americans visit a porn site each day. Addictive behavior toward sexually explicit material continues to destroy lives and marriages and careers. Objectification of sexuality may not in some minds harm everyone, but seeing another only as a physical object depresses the spiritual considerations of human sexuality and violates God's good intentions of creation. We don't say much about that. Eye and face protection requires a disciplined eyesight to turn away from unhealthy temptations, whether those are found in pornographic pictures or, I add, gratuitous violence. It is amazing the number of violent images our children see before they're 15. From video games to movies to television. Eye protection would require averting eye contact with advertisements that also tantalize us with materialism and greed and covetousness. It means to be able to train our eyes to see what is good and true and right in the eyes of God. But we need hand protection. The Bible mentions hand washing repeatedly. So wash your hands, make yourselves clean, stop doing what is wrong. Cleanse your hands, purify your hearts. Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? Those who have clean hands and a pure heart, who do not lift up their souls to what is false and do not swear deceitfully. But hand washing signifies the willingness to protect the body from invasive disease, but it also means doing what is right, working for justice, refusing to pick up that which is evil in God's sight, picking up those who are less able to pick themselves up from poverty and suffering. Hand washing means refusing to mishandle others, ceasing to carry a lie, setting down an injurious rumor or gossip. Our hands can lift us up or hold us down in ruin. They can be lifted up in prayer. But we also need a kind of bodily protection. The body is repeatedly considered a gift from God. Writers refer to the body as a temple. Do you not know you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? The body is the habitat of the Holy Spirit, and we're warned to be careful what we take into our bodies, and certainly how much we take in terms of consumption. When Paul talks about the community of faith, he mentions the analogy to the body as a community where all the parts are important, one part no greater than the next part. And so he introduces into the community of faith a kind of holistic thinking about all the parts, a kind of spiritual appreciation for bodily harmony. It also means that the body as a community relies on each part to do what is necessary for the whole body. We're only as healthy as our parts. And how soon we realize this in the fabric of any community and certainly a society when we're not on the same page for our national health. We need respiratory protection. We've heard that quite a lot. We definitely need respiratory protection from a deadly virus transmitted by microscopic particles breathed into the air. But we need respiratory protection from pollution and gases and harmful vapors too. Because our spiritual breathing needs a kind of protection from the noxious odors that rise up from that which is profane and silly and godless. In the Old Testament, God refused to enjoy the odors of the burnt sacrifices that were lit on the altars of the worshiping community because it was an idolatrous community. God says, I don't take any delight in your vain offerings and your burnt sacrifices. God wasn't amused. They smelled bad. The odor was old and musty and corrupt, and God smelled those impurities and knew the corruption. We need a kind of spiritual respiratory protection. And one of the ways I think that we get that is when we fail to return evil for evil. We cease to circulate evil to be breathed by others. Gossip, insults, loveless criticism are all noxious odors. Our social media is overwhelmed right now with angry diatribes and name-calling and further divisions of society and culture. Filtering it means offering a cleaner air to breathe, that is, a repetition of that which is lovely as a fragrance and redemptive. We provide the perfume of our generous offerings to cover the stench of selfishness. Charity is an oxygen which strengthens the race that we all run in faithful generosity. Paul describes an environment cleaned up when we think about truth and honor and justice and peace and purity. That's the air that we want to breathe. And those fragrances are the ones that please God. Those are the sacrifices of the human heart that are acceptable to God. What a breath of fresh air that would be, and our politic and our public persona. And we need hearing protection. Now, many of us didn't think we need hearing protection when we were younger. I didn't. I'm rethinking that right now. Because hearing loss comes to all of us, and some of us sooner rather than later because of our foolishness. Refusing to wear hearing protection, running jackhammers, and working in industrial parks, shooting firearms without appropriate hearing aids. You know, if your spouse is asked, what is the single most frequent word heard from your significant other? And if your spouse says, huh, or what, or come again, you probably needed hearing protection when you were younger. But it's true. We've been given ears to hear. And we protect our hearing spiritually when we learn to listen for God, when we meditate, when we shut out the noise of the world and we tune to what is the frequency of love, when we attune our hearts to hear the good news of grace, when we surround ourselves with grateful people who speak praise to God, who give encouragement to others, and give thanks for loving relationships. We make certain that the words of life and not death are on our tongues for others to hear, and we follow up what we say, we believe, by our actions, so there is no doubt that we meant what we said. So you can tell that it's possible in a contemporary way to take personal protective equipment and use it as an analogy for the armor of God, which is what the writer of Ephesians did, simply using the illustration of a Roman soldier. PPE, for me, removes this highly militaristic image of a Roman soldier armed for battle. PPE, for me, is contemporary and relevant to our struggles to combat an invisible foe that threatens to injure, maim, and kill us. Yet one more image comes to us in the urging from this writer in Ephesians, and it is an image that does carry the image of an army and an army's strength. It's the shield of faith. The image sounds singular, yet each soldier with his own shield was designed to stand shoulder to shoulder with the next soldier, and those shields were designed to interlock and fasten together. And if you've ever seen a picture of a Roman army and that initial front line of soldiers together, those shields are attached together and they move in one forward line. And then there is a second line behind that front line of soldiers with shields that are holding them over their head and over the heads of that front line. And this army of soldiers is moving forward, impenetrable. And the reason is they're moving together, faithfully, locked together. Because an army is stronger than a mere collection of soldiers. Our shield of faith is both individual and collective. A solitary individual is not as faithful as one that is in community with others. A solitary individual who thinks faith is singular, autonomous, to use Paul's analogy of the body, is saying, I have no need of you. Faith is most effectively exercised in community. And I want to say this. A faithful individual or faithful citizen believes in the collective strength of the whole. A faithful community and faithful nation realizes we're all in this together. In sickness and in health, till death do us part. Amen.